That's another thing that we don't really talk about. You don't have to own your own private practice to be an entrepreneur in this chiropractic realm. The reason that I mention that is because that's kind of the realm that I'm playing with right now. And it's extremely profound because I'm seeing non chiropractors want to get into the chiropractic entrepreneurship realm because they see it's lucrative, because they understand numbers, they understand healthcare. A lot of times, chiropractors have a level of uniqueness that's a little bit resistant to consistency and collaboration. And I think that has been a detriment to our profession, unfortunately. And as unique as we are as individuals, it's very important to have a unified voice, like Ben said, with the idea of collaborating and having mutual respect for each other. I'm learning that what has to come before respect is that clarity or that decision of what we are trying to accomplish.
Hey, what's going on? Dr. Ben Glass here on the Pre Chiro podcast with my brother Derrell. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights with us this morning. This podcast is really centering the voice on the Pre Chiro student. You're very familiar with this. You have a history with this. So can you tell the audience a little bit about first what your chiropractic story was and what your background was before you came to chiropractic school?
Okay. Well, first of all, Ben, I really appreciate you having me, man. I know this is a long time coming, right? We've been working together for a very long time, and like life happens, but here we are, and I'm so grateful that you brought me on. Usually, when I talk about my story, it's not too profound in the sense of how I got into chiropractic school. I usually tell chiropractors to tell people you would make a good chiropractor, just because we need more quality chiropractors, and that's what somebody told me. I didn't have much direction coming out of college. I was an exercise physiology major, finished exercise physiology, did the whole kinesiology thing. I knew I wanted to help people. Somebody said you'd be a good chiropractor, so I looked into it. And I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I had never even been adjusted before chiropractic school, so that's a very interesting point too. And look at me now.
We are going to take a deep look into the path that you took because I believe it's very unique. I want to keep it very focused though on how we can provide some value. What types of questions should pre-chiropractic students be asking themselves? Maybe you have some insight after having spoken to prospective students
Yeah.
for a while. What are the types of things that you think students should be thinking of?
I think first and foremost is if you want to dedicate yourself to a life of service, and I say that because chiropractic isn't the easiest road when it comes to a way to help people, because we can help people in a lot of different ways, but chiropractic is actually a little bit different, and not necessarily different from what it is that we do, but it's a little bit different from what people understand health to be. So you really want to make sure that you're dedicated to a life of service, a life of educating people, showing people a different way, basically, because again, our culture doesn't necessarily share with us how we heal or how to be healthy as much as it is creates customers or consumers. So you really want to make sure that you're dedicating yourself to education, dedicating yourself to a life of service, and also being willing to dive deep into what makes chiropractic different, so that way you're valuable as a practitioner.
Would you recommend that students start going deep into the philosophy of chiropractic before they even go to chiropractic school?
I would say it's something to consider. I wouldn't even take it as far as the philosophy of chiropractic as much as it is just a philosophy of life and health and healing. Start asking yourself, like, how do we heal? Why are we healthy? Why can you and I be in the same room and one person gets sick and the other person not? So I wouldn't necessarily call that chiropractic philosophy. I would just say start thinking outside of the box and um, start doing a little bit of research yourself. But if you want to get into chiropractic philosophy, obviously that's a good place to start. But because it'll teach you a lot. But just a philosophy in life. Because even if you're not a chiropractor, right, you still want to understand where health comes from, how to achieve
Mhm.
a high quality life, like simple things like that.
No doubt. So you went to chiropractic school
Mhm.
and you had a pretty interesting experience there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
speak on some of the highlights of your student experience in chiropractic education?
Yeah. I'll say one of the first highlights was actually my intern experience, right? So as a chiropractic student, you have the opportunity to do a year internship at the end. And I think because I was also a professor, and I'm sure we'll get to that, but one of the things I noticed is that a lot of people, whether it was my colleagues at the time or even when I was teaching, kind of take that year for granted as if it's just a part of the process and you're just ready to get out. Um, but my experience really started with my intern adjusting me, and it was the first person to ever adjust me, and I had profound results. So I don't want people to take that for granted, and that really made me consider looking and learning about chiropractic a little bit differently. That personal experience, and I got into it just because I wanted to help people perform better and heal faster, and that was just from an athletic perspective, having played college sports. And then I really realized it was bigger than that, and going through school, that's where I really started to dive deep. And of course, in chiropractic school, it was specifically in the chiropractic philosophy and understanding where this stuff came from and understanding some of the questions that we were asking to get to the answers and to the science that we did, and to the methods and assessment that we do to provide that artful chiropractic adjustment. But that takes time, and that's what my 3.5 year journey was all about, just kind of figuring out what chiropractic was, figuring out who I was, how I wanted to serve it. There was a lot of eye opening when it came to chiropractic politics and understanding the differences between schools and all this other stuff, because there was a lot of that turmoil while I was on campus. So that was kind of eye opening and interesting to see how people thought about chiropractic differently. But I mean, if this year's taught us nothing, we really do have to value perspective and understand everybody doesn't see the world out of the same lens you do. So it's very important to understand that in chiropractic also. Not everybody's going to understand the profession out of the same lens you do, but also when we're talking about the community, they're not going to see health out of the same lens we do. So that's why we have to dedicate ourselves.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Right around the time you were an intern, I was also an intern, and we started doing this little project where we would go out into the community and just practice communicating chiropractic with people that we didn't know, that we had never met before. And it was really inspiring to just recognize that people were on the vibe. Like, you would share the message of chiropractic and people were receptive. They would show love. You were coming from a place of love when you were sharing it, because you were uncomfortable a little bit and you just wanted that sort of validation. But at the same time, you were also just like sharing a really profound message. So can you share a little bit about what it takes to become clear on chiropractic, and like that certain that we need as chiropractors in regards to like who we are as chiropractors and that identity? Because I think that both you and I, we went to chiropractic school. We had a completely different identity. I was also a college athlete. I didn't know what chiropractic was. I had been adjusted a handful of times, but it wasn't like adjusted. It was kind of just like I had seen a chiropractor. It was like just checking out the profession. I had been told to kind of look elsewhere, and I was just going off on my own to see like what it was. And I wasn't inspired by it, so I wasn't really thinking chiropractic. But can you talk a little bit about how far you've come in regards to becoming clear on what chiropractic is, and like certainty as a chiropractor?
That's a great question. I appreciate you bringing up those videos, because it's like we kind of take it for granted, and I almost forgot about it. But I think that's the answer. One, you have to get really uncomfortable with your paradigm, where you are, what's your platform, right? You have to get really uncomfortable what that is and what you want that to become. Two is a level of curiosity. You mentioned those videos, and again, that's what it was. We were curious. We wanted to know what other people thought about health. We wanted to know what they thought about chiropractic. We wanted to know, again, simple questions like what controls your body? You know what I mean? So a genuine curiosity. So be willing to get uncomfortable, be curious, and last, I would say be vulnerable. Know that you don't know everything. Be willing to be wrong. Be willing to fail forward. So there's a lot of things that just bringing up those videos kind of brought up in regards to becoming clear, because I like how you use the word clear, and you kind of wrapped it up with certainty. I want to make sure that we're clear, that there's a difference, right? Like being clear and clarity is a lot different than certainty. And if we're going to talk about certainty, we have to realize we're talking about the only thing that life isn't. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I love the word clear, because clear is that vision. Clarity is like looking through that glass window, that is just clear. So I love the word clear. I would rather be clear than certain. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Clear doesn't argue. Clear doesn't have to prove that they're right. Clear is just it. It just is. So in order to get clear, if I was to have a recipe, I would say, know you don't know. Be vulnerable. Stay curious. So
Yes. Yeah, we're really trying to move the pre-Chiro students to this place of being like consciously incompetent, realizing that they don't know, that they're not clear about chiropractic, because we knew how much it took, how much energy it took to really develop ourselves mentally to this place where we had studied and been immersed in it, and then we'd also gone out into the community and connected with people about it. And then we really realized who we were. We were like, wow, okay. So I see myself as this way when I'm around fellow chiropractors, but I also see myself this other way when I'm just vibing with somebody who's completely unfamiliar and is just basically somebody I want to rap with. So can you speak a little bit about that transition process of what it's like from going to this chiropractic student mindset into this professional mindset?
Yeah, and you mentioned something again very profound: conscious incompetence. You know, there's 4 stages of that, and I'm sure you'll dive deeper into that with the students. But that's really what it's about in transitioning from that conscious incompetence to conscious competence eventually once you have that education. But again, the transition between student to doctor, there's still a level of conscious incompetence, right? Because you have to understand you're entering something that you've never done before. And I mention that because no matter what you've done before, no matter what type of experience, you haven't been a chiropractor. And when you haven't been a chiropractor and you're transitioning into being one, that's a new space for you. I always would explain to students that there's going to be different levels of resistance, right? And our goal is to continue to push through that resistance. And somebody telling you no as a chiropractic student to receive care or understanding is different than them telling you no when you're a chiropractor and you're making a living doing this. And that's something that you're going to have to feel as often as possible, because the more you feel it, the more you won't. And I don't mean that in a sense of numbing that feeling. I mean in a sense of integrating that feeling and continuing to push forward, because essentially that's what life is, right? It's all integration. So you want to feel that, because eventually somebody's going to say yes. Eventually somebody's going to understand. Eventually somebody's going to want your care. But the more you hear no, the more you'll be able to integrate it, the more you'll continue that conversation, and the more yeses you're going to get eventually. So it's a difficult transition. I always tell people, so the transition that I always share with them is that entering chiropractic school is a transition, a new curriculum, new experience, new levels of difficulty. And then it's all going to be smooth sailing until you get into the health center, because again, you get to that place where you think you know a lot, and then you have to actually apply it, that art. And then that starts to get a little bit rocky, a little bit difficult. And then you start to get smooth sailing in there, and then it hits you one more time as soon as you become a doctor of chiropractic, and you're like, oh, I really have to do this. So obviously, as a practitioner, there's going to be levels and there's going to be more of it. But those are like the 3 big ones that I would always share in class, because it's important to understand you're going to hit them so we can prepare ourselves. I would be lying if I said everything is perfect. So I think that's what this is about, is just making sure that we're preparing you and you are prepared to meet that resistance and know you have that necessary support to know it is possible.
Yeah, so that discipline and that dedication is crucial, and we want to be clear on that it takes effort and it takes time. Over time, with continuous effort, people are going to get there, and these transition points are the most uncomfortable points, right? Getting into school and then arriving with brand new set of community that you're trying to become familiar with, and then also the curriculum is very much a different level than undergrad and preparatory training. There's people that come to chiropractic school that are transitioning careers. Maybe they've already had 10 or 20 years in a career and they're trying to change up. And then there's students that are right out of high school. In other countries, students can go right into a chiropractic program right out of high school. So really the background is really diverse. Can you speak a little bit about the diversity that you've experienced or lack thereof? Speak to the positive of like what we've seen in the schools and the direction that the schools are heading in regards to increasing diversity. Because really a big major point of this podcast and this conversation is to reach out to new communities that have never really heard from us, have never really heard about chiropractic, and there's no better time than now with the internet, and
Yeah,
people from all over the world can hear this message, right?
exactly right. And I'm glad you brought up diversity in a space regarding experience, right? Because that's what diversity is. Diversity isn't just about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual preference. Like diversity is everything. Diversity is diversity of thought. Like diversity, and every single person is different, you know. Um, so to speak to, let's start off with the idea that people can have different levels of experience coming into school. I think that's important because again, that adds experience, perspective to the dialogue that's happening in the classrooms, right? So we can learn from each other. One of the things that the schools did, they allowed students that did not have the prerequisites for chiropractic school, but had a degree to start school. So now you're getting people with dancing degrees, with business degrees, with anthropology degrees coming into school, which is some people didn't think was a good idea, but I think it's powerful because now you're having experienced people with different backgrounds coming in having the same conversation about chiropractic, but they're coming from different perspectives, right? So that's extremely valuable when you're learning, when you're having a business conversation about chiropractic with somebody who's been to business school, you know, so that could add value. Diversity adds value to your thought process and things that you may not have known. So when we take that into the space of what we're experiencing in 2020, this social unrest and these different thought processes and perspective, and like I said, if we've learned nothing, we can learn that diversity is valuable. You know what I mean? Not necessarily just because different is good, but it's extremely valuable, especially when we're talking about chiropractic. That's what I want you to understand. The more you value diversity and the more you can value what it means to be different, then you are becoming a chiropractor because chiropractic is different. And schools aren't necessarily taking the steps to become diverse that they could be because the profession isn't diverse enough yet. I've had a lot of conversations around this diversity question with the profession specifically, and we have to understand that we can't expect a non diverse profession to become diverse through just what they've been doing. We have to change something, and that's why I respect you so much for doing this because we can't do the same thing and expect different results, right? That's literally the definition of insanity. So when we have a profession that's not as diverse as we would like, even some of their outreach is a little bit inorganic and is a little bit difficult, right? So they're doing their best. And I always want to give credit where it's due. These schools are implementing new offices and new clubs on campus and all this different stuff to foster that thought process of inclusivity, right? Because that's really what it's about. It's about being inclusive and making sure that when people like us do go to chiropractic school, that we feel like we're in the right place, that we are represented by our professors, that we are represented by our speakers and what success actually looks like, which is something that we didn't really have going through school. We could be transparent about that. And that's why you're doing this, is just to make sure that we have that opportunity to be represented and make sure people understand what success could look like as opposed to what it has in the past.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack with that statement you just made. Some of the things I'm going to key in on that I just heard was that there is a diversity of perspectives that's infinite, that every person has a unique background, a unique set of values, a unique set of experiences. And up until this point, the chiropractic profession has basically used their admissions teams to bring students into their schools and indoctrinate them with their brand, their version of chiropractic. However, now what we're trying to do is say, before you go to chiropractic school, let's all come together and have shared experiences, because even though we have different backgrounds and different views on the world, if we all come together on a similar platform, no matter what school we go to, we're going to have a mutual respect. I think born out of like the unknowing, or like not knowing your neighbor, like the schools don't really talk to each other that much unless you're in WCCS, then you can go and come together.
Correct.
I think that most students are really kept in the dark as to what other students are learning and who other students are. I know for me, I transferred schools, and so the diversity in one school versus the other in regards to like what students were doing, what they were thinking, what they were learning about chiropractic was completely different.
Yeah.
So you've taken a number of different paths within this umbrella of sort of chiropractic from a professional path standpoint.
Correct.
I also want to talk about the diversity of direction that people can take within chiropractic, because most of us get this message that if you go to chiropractic school, you're going to be a provider. That's the only direction that you're going to basically go after school. But as you know through experience, you can not only become a provider, but you could also get involved in many different ways. Can you speak to what's really unfolded for you since chiropractic graduation, sort of what you've been up to since you graduated, how you've kind of approached things?
Yeah. So again, just to speak on my perspective a little bit, I was a chiropractic student, having never received chiropractic care. After chiropractic school, I traveled out of the country to practice chiropractic. I came back to the United States and I worked for an enrollment department in a chiropractic school. Then I was in private practice, and I was in private practice for a few years before I realized that I didn't necessarily learn business the way that I was running my business. So I didn't feel as if perspectives were represented. So I decided to go back to chiropractic school as a professor, because I wanted to share that perspective. In the meantime, I got my MBA. I went back to business school because I wanted to learn more. And what that led me to is basically where I'm at, which is I'm still in private practice with my wife. And that allows me to do more things because we could run a practice on limited amount of time because she's also there. So we help exponential amounts of people between the two of us. But what I also just stepped into was a leadership role in a franchising group, which is also very unique because the profession hasn't seen anything like it at this size, at least. So I have different levels of perspective when it comes to what chiropractic could be. I know Ben and I have also discussed the opportunities to get back onto regular college campuses or undergrad, not professional schools, and just share health from different perspectives. So there's always opportunities to teach. And that's what you're doing in every single aspect of this, is just teaching a new perspective. So when you talk about opportunity, what chiropractic could be, it could be just about anything. It really just depends on what you want your life to look like, right? You could be in private practice full time, and full time could be 40 hours, so full time could be 20 hours. If you're an entrepreneur, we know that's going to be 24 hours a day usually because it doesn't really stop. You can be an associate or you can work for somebody. And technically, I want to change the terminology. I don't even want to call doctors that are hired in an office associates because there's very few professions that talk like that. They're just chiropractors, but that's systemic oppression or systematic oppression that we could talk about in chiropractic later, maybe. But the reality is, you can do that. You can be an independent contractor where you're renting space. You could be an entrepreneur and buy one of these franchises. You know, that's another thing that we don't really talk about. You don't have to own your own private practice to be an entrepreneur in this chiropractic realm. The reason that I mention that is because that's kind of the realm that I'm playing with right now. And it's extremely profound because I'm seeing non-chiropractors want to get into the chiropractic entrepreneurship realm because they see it's lucrative, because they understand numbers, they understand healthcare. A lot of times chiropractors have a level of uniqueness that's a little bit resistant to consistency and collaboration. And I think that has been a detriment to our profession, unfortunately. And as unique as we are as individuals, it's very important to have a unified voice, like Ben said, with the idea of collaborating and having mutual respect for each other. I'm learning that what has to come before respect is that clarity or that decision of what we are trying to accomplish. If we don't know what we're trying to accomplish, we're all going to be trying to accomplish a similar goal or different goals on our own. And that's what's kind of taken the chiropractic in this little tailspin of not really making progress in the 125 years that it's been around. But we have opportunities to do that, and podcasts like this talking about this prior to getting into school or prior to having these experiences is very important, because above all, we have to have respect in a direction.
Yes, and I believe there's opportunities that most students are not aware of. If you are interested in a specific technique, recognize that there's other schools with students interested in that same technique that are gaining access to different resources that would help you in your path. And so what you're describing with the direction you're going and getting involved with this franchise model and really trying to, I believe what you're trying to do is make sure you've got your finger on the pulse of how the profession's being marketed, what the messaging of the profession is, and also the systems and procedures in these franchise clinics are so crucial so that the general public is able to really get a continuity, get a consistency in their experiences. If they recommend their friend goes to the chiropractor, they're going to go to have an experience at this franchise that's similar to the experience they had because there's continuity there. I know that for me, one of the most sort of eye-opening things before I went to chiropractic school, this chiropractor in his seminar said, raise your hand if you feel comfortable referring to the chiropractor in your white page, like close your eyes, point to a random chiropractor. How many of you would refer to that chiropractor if you didn't know them? And nobody has trust. And so I believe what you're describing is we need to develop a clear picture of what's being offered and what the offerings are, so that students can really come together, the profession can come together and just be on the same page somewhat. You know, even if we want to do it in different ways, at least we're clearly moving towards the same goal. You know, there's very few healthcare professions that have multiple different political organizations that are representing the values and the vision for the profession.
Exactly.
So we're hoping that we can bring more people in that are from inner city communities because I think that there's like very few differences between chiropractic and the barbershop model, like a chiropractic model where the community comes together. People know that they can go there and be in a safe space where they see people they're familiar with, where they can have meaningful conversations and really learn. Like the youngins are getting schooled when they're at the barbershop. Just like when young people come to the chiropractor. Yesterday, I had a young man come in, 15 years old. He's been getting homeschooled, but he also grew up with parents who are from, you know, deep East Oakland, which is where I live. And he was looking at what I was doing almost like Marvel superhero. You know, he's really into the old martial arts movies, and he sees the parallels between chiropractic and that application with martial arts, which he's really interested in. So I believe there, like you said, chiropractic could be made into so many different versions of itself based on who we're talking to. But the message needs to be consistent. And that's something that I really appreciate what you're talking about doing. To talk to the chiropractic entrepreneurship piece, yes, from my perspective, the model that I'm trying to promote to pre-chiro students is to think of a chiropractor as being made up of a scientist, a thinker, an artist, a teacher, and an entrepreneur. And I believe it's very valuable to start to see yourself as an entrepreneur early on. I'm encouraging prospective students to start their own business even, or get involved in an entrepreneurial venture. So I can see there being a connection point between these franchises that you discussed and prospective students where we can develop a clear role and responsibility. I also have a person I'm taking care of now who's a pre-PT student. And in pre-PT, you're required to do a certain number of hours in a physical therapy clinic. And so I see the company you're working with is being able to develop a model where we can bring prospective students in and give them a job that they can learn. They can learn the back end and the front end through experience, of course.
Yeah, you said a lot of great things, man. And you're right. It's just a matter, you hit the nail on the head in regards to what I'm doing, why I'm trying to do it. You mentioned the barbershop and this idea of community. I think that's what it needs to be. They need to be everywhere. They need to be a safe space. And we need to just make sure that we're making this accessible to everybody, but we can't make it accessible without adequate education. Everybody knows they need a haircut just because that's just how we've been raised and it's aesthetically pleasing. Everybody doesn't know they need to get their spine checked and adjusted when necessary, you know? So we have to really start to portray value for that. So it's as regular as going to get that weekly haircut. So that's a great parallel, and I'm here for everything, man, because I know how passionate you are about it, and I want to make sure that we're making this accessible to everybody so we could diversify this profession, not necessarily just from race, ethnicity, gender, sexual preference, but again, that thought process to make sure that we're moving us forward in the right direction with that clarity.
Absolutely. Imagine you were an incoming student that knew that you could go and get a job in a corporate setting and make
Hmm.
an impact on the world through chiropractic on a corporate level, or
Yeah,
that you knew you could go become a professor. And so you entered into the program knowing you'd be teaching one day, and you
yeah,
were really trying to understand the elements of that. So, anyway, I just want to thank you for your perspectives, man. Is there any last sort of moments of clarity that you want to share with students today that are watching this, that are considering the profession, or that are chiropractic students right now? Like, so we're in 2020, there's a
yeah,
lot of adversity, there's a lot of need for good guidance
yeah,
and clear messages to these people that are having to adapt so
yeah.
intensively.
Um, Focus on possibility. You know, it's one thing to be told what's possible. It's one thing to be told what to do. It's one thing to look at what exists already and try to replicate it. Be innovative, focus on possibility, understand your perspective is valuable, understand that you problem solve differently just based on your life experiences out of necessity, and that's extremely valuable. You're going to look at chiropractic, you're going to look at healthcare completely differently, and that's valuable. I've used the word value a number of times because it's what it's about. It's not about price, it's not about money, it's about creating value. And when you create value, you have something that people need, you're going to live a life of service that is going to be in abundance. So just make sure you understand how valuable your perspective is, know that you're one of one, and stay focused on that possibility and know chiropractic is one of them.
I want to congratulate you on breaking the mold, man. You paving a new way.
Yeah,
You shining light on things people aren't considering. That's what I'm aiming to do too. That's why we vibe.
yeah.
And I just want to, appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Always, man. Always. I appreciate you.